Alright everybody, welcome back to another Magic the Gathering tournament from Lost Legion Games and Comics in South Charleston, West Virginia. We're excited today to bring you live coverage of a Star City Games Invitational Qualifier featuring 45 players, all kicked in $25 to Battle Standard. The winner gets $250 and an invite to the Star City Invitational of their choice over the next calendar year. And since we did hit our 40-player threshold, there's an additional box of prize support, so it should be a pretty lucrative tournament for all those involved. 45 players means 6 rounds, followed by a cut to top 8, and we'll bring you coverage of all of the rounds that players actually decide to play. So on the left, we've got Michael Miller. He's playing an interesting Bant control deck. It may be more mid-range than control, as you do see a turn 3 Corsair revealing what will inevitably be a turn 4 Kiora. But he's also a Sphinx's Revelation and Counterspell deck, so it's just an interesting take on this. I think it's his own deck. I don't think this is a list that he's emulated from somewhere around the net. And on his opponent is stream regular Garrett Meadows, who is back to just blue-white. He's experimented with Esper excuse me, the last few weeks, but has decided to eschew the Black Splash for some more consistency, and is playing the Elixir of Immortality deck with the 1 Elspeth and the 3 Jaces. So we should have a deck deck lists here at some point once the tournament kind of settles down. We do have about 60 people in the shop today between this tournament staff and other gamers, so it is a little bit crowded out there, but definitely a good problem to have. So Mike lands the Corsair. It starts doing work, cycling an Azorius Charm at end of turn. Obviously not as lucrative in this matchup as it would be against other mid-range and aggro decks. Corsair flips a Dissolve. We see Mike's hand's pretty stocked here. He's got a Sphinx's Rev, Syncopate, and a Detention Sphere. All cards great against the control cards out of Garrett's deck. And cannot make out exactly what Garrett's holding. The Corsair continues to serve in here. Mike likely choosing not to run out his Kiora until he can protect it with the counterspell here. Is he getting itchy here? He might decide to pull the trigger. So we did pull the trigger on the Kiora, and that gets nabbed by a Dissolve, which we more than likely could have expected at that point. Garrett scrying one to the bottom, it looked like. And then passing back. Interesting there. Mike did have the line of baiting end of turn with the Sphinx's Rev to resolve a Kiora. He also looks like he has 2 copies of Sphinx's Revelation in his hand now, which I believe, wow, and another Kiora off the top. So he could have chained those together and resolved one of them. So there's an Azorius Charm. Going to set Mike back a little bit here, as it will keep him from not only doing damage, but drawing that Kiora for a second turn. Looks like Mike's deciding to pick a fight over this. Seems pretty aggressive to do that, and Mike thinks better of it. So the Corsair goes back on top, and then Mike's going to tap out for a Jace Memory Adept, and just immediately goes to the mill plan. We see milling 2 Sphinx's Revs out of Garrett. Garrett's deck is actually pretty susceptible to the mill plan, specifically because he plays so few win conditions. If he gets his Elixir, then he's basically drawing to just the 1 Elspeth and the 3 Jaces. So Garrett in a situation here really needs to find, he's digging with divination, I guess looking for a D-Sphere and a 3rd land here. Let's see if he can find it. And he does either find the D-Sphere he's looking for, or the well, that's unlikely that he needed a land at that point. He would have just run it out instead of playing the divination, but Threat answered. It's interesting when the Jace Mirror Adept comes down. A lot of times it goes immediately to the 0 to mill, and I think in that situation, Mike may have been best served to just drawn a card off of it. So the Kiora still on top. The Courser replayed. Mike misses his land drop here, but he is representing Dissolve, and he does have Dissolve in his hand. So Courser surprisingly getting a lot of work done here in terms of card advantage. Garrett does have 2 copies of Last Breath in his main deck, which can be an answer to that. Jace inbound. There is a Jace. It's going to get dissolved, and we'll see if Garrett has a Syncopate. He does not. So Jace down. Mike choosing not to scry, obviously leaving the Kiora on top. Garrett plays a Temple of Enlightenment and shoves it here, so there's a land off the top from Mike. Seems like he would likely play that one before doing anything else. You want to maximize the amount of information you can get. So there is the land off the top, revealing Temple of Mystery. Tapping 4, is this a Jace of our own? No, it's the Kiora that we knew was on top. We know Garrett doesn't have a Negate or a Syncopate. Syncopate's not good here. Negate very unlikely. Now we see the value here. Ticking down the Kiora, drawing a card, playing the Temple that's on top, scrying. It is another land. He's going to shove that, revealing that to Garrett because it is on top, so it needs to be revealed to the Courser's static ability. Another Temple on top. So Michael getting a ton of card advantage here. Still not presenting much of a clock, but that Kiora is going to be able to draw him a lot of cards here. Now those Mutavaults are going to come in and kill that Kiora, as far as I can tell. Unless Mike has some kind of answer. And Garrett kind of living dangerously there, not playing around Azorius Charm or Last Breath, just sending in with the 1 Mutavault. I think in this matchup you're probably content to just effectively draw 2 cards off of Kiora and force your opponent to tap 2 mana. So it looks like Sphinx is revving for 3 here during, was that during Mike's upkeep, or maybe that was at end of turn and Mike just went ahead and untapped anyway. So not sure if there was a shortcut there, or we're just intentionally doing it during Michael's turn. Centaur beatdown continues as the giant spider taking Garrett's life total 2 hits at a time. So there is a Temple of Enlightenment. Seems like you would want to leave that Dissolve on top unless you're short of business. But we know Mike has 2 Sphinxes rev, so I guess the plan here is probably rev at the end of Garrett's turn and then rev again. Or he could have revved there with Garrett tapped out, so not sure exactly what Mike's game plan is here. And there's a Jace Architect of Thought. Can't make any cards out in Garrett's hand other than 1 Plains, but that sticks. And we're going to immediately start drawing cards here. Island Temple and a replacement Jace. Interesting here. Okay. Garrett going to take the Planeswalker here. But again, 55 minutes in rounds today because it is competitive REL. Trying to give the players the benefit of some extra playtime. Of course, that will benefit both of our control players here. So Verdict clears out the Courser. Garrett effectively tapped out here, so let's see how Mike chooses to proceed. 3 mana for a replacement Courser, revealing Thassa off the top. Well, Mike's deck's got some saucy ones in it here. Thassa very interesting in these control mirrors because it seems like the ability to scry returns pretty huge, actually. I don't think he's ever turning it on, but who knows. So there's a D-Sphere. I like the way Mike played this here by playing the courser first, figuring out what's on top, using that information, then despheering rather than the alternative. And he still leaves up dissolve. Of course, Garrett knows about the dissolve. It was revealed to courser last turn. And there's the replacement Jace that Garrett drew off the last Jace. And Mike's going to counter back. Does Garrett have a counter spell? And now I think the question is not whether or not he has one, but whether or not he wants to fight over it. Because this body language clearly indicates that he does have a counter spell. So it's either a great bluff or a real decision here. So Garrett does in fact decide to dissolve. He's going to shove that card off of the dissolve scry. And then we're just going to tick that up. Play a temple from our hand, shove that one as well. Desperately looking for an Elspeth here. Oh my. The top of Mike's deck is so interesting. So Cyclonic Rift inbound. And there is the Thassa. There is D-Sphere on the Jace. Serve in for 1. I think we had an issue with the. I'm not sure if that life hit was correct, but it's very difficult for me to interact in these games, given the fact that it is competitive REL, and it's much more difficult than in our normal FNM. So unless there's something very egregious, I'm not going to try to interject into this match. So there is an Aetherling on the top, and the hits just keep coming for Mike here. So we're no need to overload the Cyclonic Rift, just get the Jace back. And at this point you might go ahead and start milling him out. Because, well, no, I think you probably just draw a card, because you know, well, you have a choice here. You can try to mill his Elixir and his Elspeth, in which case Garrett is drawing very thin to win this game. Or you can just draw the card because you know the Detention Sphere is coming back next turn. And I believe Mike is hellbent here, so might just want that extra card. Just draw the Aetherling, run it out there, see if it resolves. It is interesting at this point, Thassa is now active. Yeah, so Mike chooses probably the better line of play here. We're going to cast a pre-combat Aetherling, I guess? Aetherling sticks. Serve in with the Thassa, serve in with the Courser. Garrett's going to take a draw here and scoop him up. So Mike's deck, very interesting. Very excited to see some of the goodies he's got going on there. So Garrett down a game here in a round 1 feature match, trying to get back on the winning track here in this control mirror here, but two very different builds of the control archetype. Garrett, a pretty classic blue-white draw go deck, and Mike, we're seeing some spicy cards out of his deck. In game 1 we saw Thassa, Cyclonic Rift, Kiora, Courser of Krufix, just to name a few. And that, as well as an Aetherling, and he was able to land ride a combination of those to the win at game 1. After sideboard, we'll see how these decks change, but so far, nothing unexpected. Garrett just going to cycle a Divination here on turn 3, content to tap out, as Michael can't really land anything with his current mana that Garrett's too concerned about. He's short the green he would need to go double green into Courser of Krufix here. So there is a green source, Temple of Mastery, shoving a card to the bottom here. Again, seeing the power of the Scrylands, originally panned when the set was announced, but standard players quickly realizing how functional it is to be able to set up your draws with Scry. Michael just cycling in his Orange Charm. Interesting that they're still in the deck, one of the lower impact cards in the deck, but at instant speed it basically plays as Gataxian Probe in this, or Mystic Speculation, whichever instant speed draw card you want to compare it to. And Garrett just content to draw and pass back here. He's up on cards with Divination. He left his Scryed card on top. So Michael weighing his options here. 1 mana for a Pithing Needle. And I'll get confirmation on what we're naming as this resolves. So we're needling Jace, Architect of Thought. Pithing Needle's a very interesting card in these decks because you want to cast it early to use your mana and get it out of the way, but oftentimes you just have to guess as to what card is going to later beat you. In these decks you want to be naming things like not just Jace, but Jace Memory Adept, Elspeth, as well as Aetherling. Garrett just continues to add to his mana base and pass back. I think the longer this game goes, the more content Garrett is. Looking at his hand, looks like there's a Gainsay. So Garrett's brought in Gainsays in some number. We see a Syncopate as well as at least one more land. And Mike shocking himself with a Temple Garden. Apologize for the glare, but we are in a different area of the store than we would normally be to accommodate the number of players that are here today. That usually telegraphing a Sphinx's Rev. Interesting. Choosing not to rev there. I mean, life total in this matchup is almost entirely irrelevant. Which Garrett is more than aware of as he is choosing not to load up his Mutavault and tech in for 2. It's just not worth the tempo loss of effectively getting stone drained by a Last Breath, Celestial Flare, or or an Azorius Charm. So Garrett, Sphinx's Rev for 3, leaving up Gainsay mana. Mike taps 4 here for a Syncopate for 3. Garrett's going to Gainsay back on the Syncopate. And that's going to be good enough, so the Sphinx's Rev sticks. Garrett's going to gain 3 life, but more importantly, draw 3 cards and untap with Mike tapped low and probably out of counter magic here. There's another Mutavault. And so we do have the ability to cast Elspeth with Dissolve backup here. But instead of Dissolve, we're just going to go with Jace AOT. And there's a D-Sphere. Obviously going to be targeting the Pithing Needle. And that's going to work. So these guys are discussing. We might have to get a judge here because it matters on when we're doing it. If we're doing it in response to the trigger, Mike doesn't have priority, so Garrett's going to be able to use his Jace 1 time. If Mike's doing it, once Garrett's named the target here, Mike can't respond because he doesn't have priority. Yeah, so Garrett could have I don't know what happened there. Oh, okay. So Garrett just chose not to use it, I guess? Unless I'm mistaken here. I think that's how that would have worked there. Once Garrett names Needle as the target, Mike... yeah, Mike can... yeah, he could still respond to the trigger. And then it gets bounced in response to the target. And then nothing happens. Because there is no Fiend Hunter wording on D-Sphere. It does come back as soon as it's gone, so it's never permanently exiled. And there is a Mistcutter Hydra. So deciding who we want to attack here. Do we want to kill the Jace or do we want to go after Garrett? It looks like we're just going after Garrett here. So it'll be interesting to see if Garrett left in the Supreme Verdict. Since Mike is a Courser of Krufix deck, he might have left them in. So this time the D-Sphere sticks. We're going to tick up Jace, revealing Negate, Jace, and Temple. So, Planeswalker or Counter Magic in a land. I think Garrett wants that Negate, so I think he may have just gotten a free land out of it. I think he might, probably could talk me into splitting it the other way. But Garrett's still going to need to find an answer to this 4-turn clock in Mistcutter Hydra. Probably doesn't have Azorius Charms left in his deck, but D-Sphere is not going to do it. Aetherlink's not going to be able to block it. He's going to need to find his Elspeth or a Verdict here. He can buy some time with Mutavaults if he wants to Stone Rain himself just for the tempo. And then Garrett discards to hand size. And just passes back here, so. So the Mistcutter gets in. Mike has a D-Sphere of his own to answer the Jace Architect of Thought. And then just passes back on Sphinx's Rev, Syncopate, and an Aetherling. End of turn. There is a Sphinx's Revelation, which is going to be met with a Syncopate. It's going to get removed from the game. But Garrett has free reign here to resolve whatever he wants to. This Hydra doing some significant work here. Garrett needs to find an answer. And there is a Jace Memory Adept. We know that's going to resolve. The question is Garrett going to draw some cards, or is he going to try to use this as a win condition? And I think he's all in on the Jace here. I think Garrett has rather correctly decided he's only going to win this game if he mills Mike out. He may not have verdicts left. So it looks like a Cure on a lot of lands. Simic Charm, that's an interesting one. And then Garrett, I think, is planning to chump block here with his Mutavault. Mike draws a D-Sphere. Will the D-Sphere resolve? There's a Negate that we know about. Garrett has the mana to dissolve. I'm going to scry one to the bottom here. So this might be slipping away from Mike here, although he does have the Elixir. I think Garrett is desperately hoping he can get Mike to tap out so that he can needle the Elixir. Which might be ambitious at this point, but You do what you gotta do, I guess. So there's a pithing needle. He does not have to name what. He does not have to name anything. Yeah, and Mike correctly in response blows up his elixir of immortality. So Garrett goes back to what's likely a 5-turn clock with Jace here. At this point, he's probably going to. I'm going to think he names Aetherling here. But we'll figure it out. So this needle's naming Kiora, which also seems like a good choice at this point. And then Garrett just passes back again. He does have a Mutavault, so he can still chump block to save his Jace here. And then Mike draws another Detention Sphere. And there's a Dissolve from Garrett. Counter magic at a premium at this point, just so he can keep his Mistcutter around. Same chump block mode enabled, and Mike passes back. We know his cards are just Aetherling and Sphinx's Rev. Now Garrett left a card on top with that Dissolve. I'm trying to think what he would leave at this point. It would have to be Verdict, but I'm convinced at this point are not in his deck. We see a Jace nab another D-Sphere and Elspeth. So all the D-Spheres I think are gone out of Mike's deck. And he does get the elixir this time. And just passes back here. So we don't have anything to deal with this. There's another Mistcutter Hydra. There's 19 minutes remaining in the round, according to the boss out there. Oh my! What a blowout! Oh my goodness! There it is. Fated Retribution, blowing up all creatures and all planeswalkers. Garrett more than content to do this. He's got Mike tapped out. He can resolve a Sphinx's Rev if he wants here. And he does. So he's going to go draw 5 cards, it looks like. One of Fated Retribution. So dueling 19-point life totals here. Mike finds an Aetherling here. Garrett does play one of Disperse, so he could potentially bounce the Pithing Needle and rename it and play it again, but just when you think Garrett's ahead here, Mike finds the window to land his Aetherling. Now it's going to be Dissolve or 2 counterspells. I think that's fine. Like, he's going to get 2 counterspells either way. Might as well give him... I think the Scry is probably more important at this point, given how much mana Garrett has access to. So there's a needle. And Garrett's going to go ahead and stop that. So we kill off our Jace here and reveal Revoke Existence, Azorius Charm, and a land. So Mike prioritizing the card draw, and Garrett wants the disenchant. So Garrett's still up against it here. We started attacking with our Aetherling. Pumped for the max, down to 11. Here's a Sphinx's Rev. Leaving up Negate to fight over it. Drawing 5, going back up to 16. 16 important to note because that is 2-turn clock with Aetherling. But Garrett unwilling to tap out effectively. So he couldn't leave counter magic up. Now both these guys are playing, Garrett especially, playing against the clock here. Here's an elixir. A divination, probably divination. No, takes the elixir here. And there's an Elspeth, with plenty of mana to protect it. There's a Gainsay and a Negate in his hand. Garrett moving with a pretty brisk pace here, as it's obvious he's playing against not only Mike but the clock here. It's going to be unlikely that he can win this match, but playing for a draw at least here. And just for clarification of those watching after the fact, I think I had my, the chat pointing out, I think I had my, I think I had it wrong on the detention sphere. They fixed Banisher Priest wording from Fiend Hunter so that you couldn't bounce it in response and permanently exile something. But detention sphere works exactly like O-Ring, so if Mike had cast it in response to the trigger, then the Pithy Needle would have been permanently exiled. Again, not having audio out there and not knowing exactly what the sequencing was in that situation. Still not sure exactly what happened, but do want to correct that, as I did misspeak on that. So Elspeth is down thanks to an unblockable Aetherling. And at end of turn, Garrett's going to go ahead and cash in his elixir. Garrett desperately looking for, what kind of outs does he have here? An Aetherling of his own. Pithy Needle would be a pretty good one at this point. We know one Needle is already on board naming Kiora. Not sure if he has a second. He does play Disperse, so he could bounce. He has one copy of Disperse in the main. Not sure if that's still in his deck or not, but could be an answer here. And Jace activation, D-Sphere or 2 lands. Mike correctly recognizing that Mutavault is more important here. Garrett serves in for effectively 2 with his tokens. Scry land and ship the turn back. These are the perils of playing the control decks with very few win conditions. Time becomes a considerable issue. There's the negate. I think we knew about that one. I believe Garrett still has a gainsay in his hand too. So Mike down to just 1 card in hand, but he's got the most important creature in the format in play against a deck that can't really deal with it, and with about 1,000,000 mana up to protect it. So I think Mike making some slight mechanical mistakes here. Tapping blue sources when he doesn't need to. Ooh. So 10 minutes remaining in the round. And Garrett found his Elspeth again. Looks like the last card in Mike's hand is a counterspell. It is a dissolve. Very unlikely that that's going to work. There's a syncopate for enough. Elspeth's going to make a couple more tokens. We know Garrett has an Azorius Charm here, so Garrett might be able to grind this one out with soldier tokens. Mike is completely hellbent here prior to his draw. He's going to serve in at Garrett, put him down to 5. And with the Mutavault, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Puts Mike down to 6. Mike dead on board here. And doesn't Garrett still have the Azorius Charm? So serving with everybody. Just needs to pump it once. There's the Azorius Charm. Put it on top of your deck. So blink in response. And that should be game there. So serving with everybody. And that should be enough. So these guys are going to try their darndest. So excellent job by Garrett to grind that one out. Looked like a game he couldn't win, but he resolved enough Sphinx's Revelations and drew enough cards to... just over 7 minutes.
7 minutes?
Yeah. So these guys are going to have to hurry here. It's actually pretty possible for either of these decks to win. I think Mike's going to need to not worry about that and instead worry about sideboarding here. I'm sure Garrett will be on him about that. These guys just need to finish sideboarding and shuffle up as quick as possible. These decks can win in a period of time. If you land an uncontested Elspeth, you can win quickly. It's unlikely, but not impossible. So a lot of players milling around out there. Looks like the majority of people are done. I know of at least one other control mirror from two seasoned control players. There's Jonathan Wright and Ian Nolte are both battling in that archetype, so that one probably going the distance as well. Are we just conceding here? Or, yep, I think Garrett just offered the draw and Mike took it. Mike's deck much more likely to win. So, a little bit unfortunate for these guys. They are now going to be in the draw bracket for the rest of the day, which is kind of brutal for Garrett since his deck grinds so much. But that is the perils of playing the control decks. So guys, we're obviously not very much time left in the round. Also, just a fair warning to everybody, we're not going to be able to switch between matches when one finishes early, just because I don't have that luxury here, because it is a competitive event, and I don't know all the players, and I just don't want to put them at a disadvantage or fluster them in any way. But we are going to step out and take a break, and then we'll be right back.